Welcome Kerbal Space Program fans, my name's Viruk and we will be playing Kerbal Space Program in first contract mode. So that means contracts, science, the tech tree and funds are all active. So this is going to make it a little more interesting than the sandbox games that I've been playing recently. Now, despite my 400 plus hours in Kerbal Space Program, I am by no means an expert, so let's see if the contracts and science system is going to help me improve. So to begin, let's go over to the mission control and speak to Gene regarding the new contracts he has available. So first we have launch a new vessel. Now, the first few contracts are scripted apparently and hard-coded, whereas the rest start to become more and more challenging but also procedurally generated. So that means the text that you see in the briefing can actually be quite hard work to read. On the other hand, the briefing notes at the bottom here are a little more obvious to follow, so that's what we'll be concentrating on. So the first one is launch a new vessel to start the space program. Prestige is trivial. The objectives are obviously to launch a new vessel, and the rewards are listed at the bottom. So we get 1,835 funds as an advance to help build our craft. Hopefully after we've built it there'll be a bit of profit left over. As a reward for completion we'll get a further 4,587. We'll get 5 science and 11 reputation points. Obviously if we fail we'll be penalised 2,000 funds. Now funds are used to limit the size and complexity of the vessel you're launching at any given time. Science helps you progress through the tech tree in career mode, and reputation is what will help advance the quality and complexity and obviously the reward of the different challenges that we'll see here. So let's start with accepting launch a new vessel, setting an altitude record. It's only 5,000 meters and a relatively straightforward reward, so we'll accept both of those to start with and just see how we get on. Now we can see our total funds at the top here, 12,293 funds. We can see we've got a relatively neutral reputation and we start off with no science, so we better get cracking and see what science we can earn on our first mission. Now here in the vehicle assembly building we've not got very many parts to start with, so we'll start with a command pod as our basic unit of Kerbal delivery, and that's going to cost us 600 funds out of our total of 12,000 that we saw earlier. Now we don't want our Kerbal to suffer any catastrophes, so we will fit a parachute, so he should be relatively safe. Now we need some form of propulsion. Now we've got 3 choices here, well 2 choices, an engine with a fuel tank or a solid fuel booster. Now I'm going to use the solid fuel booster because I quite like these boosters. They're simple and effective, but once you fire them they're just maximum throttle or whatever thrust limit you set until they run out of fuel, but for bang for buck I really like them. So total value of this vehicle is 1,347, so it's not going to break the bank. But we might break our Kerbal if we don't sort out our staging. So down here we can control the staging, so the solid fuel booster will launch first, and when that runs out we'll be at whatever altitude we're at, and we can then deploy our parachute separately. So let's name our craft mission 1, very adventurous of us, and let's go out to the launch pad and see if we can complete our first couple of contracts. So here we are on the launch pad. Jeb is in the capsule. Now while we're here we may as well get some science, because in order to build bigger and more complex devices and contraptions, we need science. So one of the types of science we can get is to get a crew report, and you get crew report from all kinds of places. And here on the launch pad we find a kettle in the supplies container and start to beg mission control the permission to stop what you are doing and have a cup of tea. Now you won't find that in the standard text. I have loaded some mods, and this particular mod is the community collection of crew reports. It's quite a little fun little mod. Doesn't change the way the game plays, but just makes it a bit more interesting. So we will keep that data because we've got no way of transmitting it. So we'll keep that, and we can get ready for launch. So to get ready for launch, we need to make sure that we've set our thrust. Now in this case we know that there's no way we can control the thrust of this device, so it doesn't really matter what we set the thrust to with our shift to control keys. We just need to stand back, tap the space key, and up we go. We can see our solid fuel running out down here. We can also check on it here from our resources tab. While that's running out, we can see we've got a notification that tells us we've launched a vehicle, and so we've earned this reward. So we can bin that notification. The reward is in the bank. So there we go, we're way over 10,000 meters, and we've got another notification telling us we've completed the altitude record contract. So more funds in the bank, assuming we get Jeb home safely, of course. So we're still going up. We're going to get what, 17,000 meters? 17,000. You can see your altitude speed, your vertical speed here. So we're still getting up at over 100. You can see it here as well. So we might make it to 18 before we start coming down. So while we're here, we could try getting a new crew report, but that'll overwrite the existing one. We can only have one at a time. So we'll get an altitude-based crew report a bit later. So now we can see we've started to come down, so we may as well deploy our parachute. So out it goes, and hopefully that will slow us down. Still going down at a hefty speed, but we're not far from Kerbal Space Center, and we should be able to recover most of the parts. Now recovering parts is also a way of saving money, because if you destroy your part and you don't recover it, you don't save any money on the recovered parts, and funds are limited early on, so we won't be building very many big contraptions if we don't have many funds. But at least we get a nice view. Well, Jeb's getting a nice view anyway. He looks happy enough. 7.5 kilometers up, coming down gently, if you consider 188 meters a second gently. Now there are a few other mods installed which we'll get onto when the time arises, but I'll try not to use any game managing, any proactive mods, just cosmetic and informational mods, unless it becomes totally and utterly impossible for me to control some mega machine that Jeb has managed to cobble together on the launch pad. I do hope we're not going to crash onto the roof of the astronaut complex. Now up until about 500 meters we just get this drogue chute, but at about 500 it should, cross fingers, open up. There we go. So that's 500 meters above the ground, not necessarily 500 meters above sea level. And I think we're just going to come down in front of the astronaut complex and possibly miss the science complex. So that, all in all, was a pretty successful first mission I think we have just completed. We may lose the solid rocket booster, but hopefully Jeb should be safe enough in the capsule. Quite a nice view. all the other Kerbal noughts will be getting. 7.7 meters per second, that's fine. Anything less than 10 and you're probably safe. Probably. Here goes. Ouch! Well, I did say we would probably lose the booster, and we did. But there we go, mission accomplished. So I think we should recover the vessel and check out the mission summary. So, science, we got, there's the crew report, we got 1.5 science from our crew report on the launch pad, and we got 5 science simply from going into space. So with us a total of 6.5 science gained. We've now got 11 science, because obviously we got 5 science simply from doing the mission itself. We recovered the command pod, the chute and the monopropellant that was in the pod, so we recovered some funds. 1,000 funds was recovered, and Jeb survived. Now, Kerbal surviving is one of the rules for this Let's Play. So if anything disastrously goes wrong and we lose lots of Kerbals, the F-59 flight simulator might come in handy, and we'll deal with that when the time comes. So, 2 contracts down. Let's see what else Gene can provide us with today. Now, these were the 2 we saw earlier, and these are some of the procedurally generated contracts that we can select. Now, we've got no active contracts. We completed both of the original contracts and they were both successful. So what contract shall we try next? Now, TR-18A stacked decoupler in flight over Kerbal. Now, these contracts tend to have some more specific criteria. So not only have you got to be on Kerbal and you've got to be flying, you've actually got to be at a specific altitude and a specific speed. Similarly for this one, we've got to test the parachute at a particular speed and a particular altitude. We've got an altitude record of 22. Now, we managed to get to 18 just with that booster. Now, there is a technique that we can use to improve the booster's efficiency, and we may come back to have a look at that one. So, why don't we take this one and see what we can do? But before we do that, let's visit the Science Centre and just see what parts of the tech tree we can expand with our massive 11.5 science. Now, unfortunately, we've only got one choice, and it costs us 5 science, and it contains these parts. So we've got a small fuel tank, a tiny fuel tank, a mystery goo containment unit, which allows us to carry out more science, so we best have that, and a stack decoupler. Now, stack decouplers can become very useful when you want to drop empty stages, so that's a very useful section. Now, we've got 6.5 science left, but we need at least 20 to get any of these additional stages. Now, one of the rules that I'm going to put into this Let's Play is we have to complete each layer of the tech tree before we can move on to the next one. So we've got to get all 3 of these before we can move on to the next level. So this one contains more engines, some winglets and sort of, what's that, aerodynamic nose cone, another radial decoupler, so that's for decoupling things off the side of engines, and finally we've got another engine, landing struts and another type of parachute. So they all will be very useful, but we've only got 6.5 science. We need 18 for that and 20 for that, so we certainly need more science before we'll be able to get any more of those parts. So we have a contract to fulfill, so let's go and find out what we need to do to our vehicle here to complete our new contract. So we can check the contract down here, which is just achieve a new altitude record of 22,000. Now we got to 18,000 just using this vehicle. Now, one of the things that we should be able to do now is put in a stack decoupler in here, and that will allow us to discard the engine once we get up above a certain height. Now we know the engine's not going to survive recovery, so there's no point in keeping it. But how are we going to get this up to 22,000 meters? Now, we were certainly going way too fast off the launch pad, and by being too fast too early on, we get hit by drag. So let's reduce the speed of this craft by reducing the thrust, the maximum thrust we're going to use. So we can do that. Now while we're here, we should use some more science. So let's have a look. We can add these goo containers, and we should add 2, I guess. So let's just up the symmetry mode by clicking that button there. Now we've got 2, so it means our ship will be balanced, and we have 2 opportunities to take goo related science. So let's rename this vessel, we'll save it and take it out to the launch pad. Right, so for mission 2 we're back on the launch pad. Jeb's ready to fly, but again we should observe our mystery goo on the launch pad, and we get 3 science for that. Again, we can't transmit it, so we will keep that science. Now if we try to do a crew report again, we get no science because we've done the crew report for this location, so we'll discard the crew report for this location. So let's stand back and just double check our staging. Now, big staging mistake there. We would have jettisoned our engine the moment we launched it, and I'm sure you were all screaming at the screen for me to check that earlier. So we'll correct that now, and let's check on our objective. 3, 2, 1, launch. Now we're going much slower for the relative altitude. Our fuel is going down a little more slowly, so hopefully it will last us a little bit longer. We won't be affected by drag quite as much, and we'll make 22,000. Now let's hope that 2/3 thrust is enough to make up for the difference in drag that we would have been losing if we'd gone much quicker than this. Now while we're ascending, let's get another crew report, and we get 3.5 science for this crew report, and we'll keep that data. Right, we made it to 12,000, and we're still going up at 400 meters a second. Will we make it to 22,000? You know, I don't think we will. Slowing down. Not quite going to make it. Still, we may as well get some mystery goo observed, and we will keep that. Oh, it was so close. So close. Come on. No! Oh, 200 meters off. 200 meters off. Ah, well. We will just have to repeat the mission and see if a slightly lower thrust gets us any higher. We only need to overcome or undercome a little bit of drag lower down in the altitude spectrum, a little bit closer to the ground, and maybe we can make 22. I reckon we can make 22, but I am only guessing. But then guesswork is what KSP is all about, I guess. Away it goes. One lost booster. Now, of course, this is where profit margins might become a bit tight, because every time you make a launch and you fail, the funds are gone. But the funds are only extracted from your bank account when you actually launch the vehicle, so you're free to experiment up to the point of launch as much as you like. But let's not try to waste too many launches. Now, of course, we could try something else, because we now do have an alternative to solid rocket boosters. If you're not a solid rocket booster fan like I am, we could just try liquid fuel, and liquid fuel might get us a little bit further regardless. So why don't we try that? Rather than trial and error, we can't afford trial and error this early in the game. So we'll just try more fuel. Now, more fuel isn't always good, but in this case I think we'll make an exception. Now, we're a little bit further away from the Space Centre this mission, which will mean we will lose a little bit of the recovery value, which makes up for the cost of actually transporting the recovered materials, I guess. Bit of role play. Now, this wasn't an entirely wasted mission, because of course we do get 2 goo containers worth of science, and we got another crew report. We can also do an EVA, because the ground is split up into biomes, and this is probably grasslands. So why don't we get Jeb out to stretch his legs? So we just let go. Jeb seems happy enough, and we can do a surface sample, which gets us 9 science, which is quite a lot really. We'll save that, and we can do an EVA report, gets us another 2.4, and yes, we do seem to be on our home planet. So we'll save that. Now, just to simplify recovery, we'll get Jeb back in, grab onto the pod, board, and we'll recover the vessel. So, slightly more in our mission summary. We got 25.7 science, which was a pretty good haul, giving us a total of 32 science. We recovered the command pod, the parachute, the 2 mystery goo containment units, and some monopropellant. And of course, Jeb is back. So we've got a total of 25 reputation from that mission, giving us 72 in all, and you can see our reputation is slowly growing, and that will give us more prestigious missions later in the game, so that's always good to know. So here we are back in the vehicle assembly building. So we're not going to use solid rocket boosters for the next stage. We are going to try our hand at liquid engines. Now, I have no idea how many liquid tanks we're going to need. Let's just use good old trial and error. So there's 3 of those tanks which we unlocked in our previous visit to the Science Centre. More tanks, more fuel. Let's stick on another one. Now, if that isn't going to get us up, nothing will. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll soon see. So, mission 3, or is this really mission 2A? We will save this and go back out to the launch pad. Now, we haven't got any launch stabilizers, so let's hope this stands up on its own. It does. Now, because we've got a liquid engine, the throttle actually makes a difference, so let's throttle all the way up. Now, to prevent this thing just swaying around in the wind, we've also got a device built into capsules called SAS. And the advantage of SAS is that it is a flywheel-like system which can help you maintain your direction, whichever direction you set it in. So there are inline flywheels later in the tech tree. I think they're called inline reaction wheels, and they can be used. And there's a similar system built into capsules. So let's try that, and we can try that by switching the T key on just to set us up and set us up vertically. Let's just double check our staging. So our engine will launch first, then we will decouple the capsule, and then we will drop the parachute. So we're ready. You ready, Jeb? Throttle is up. 3, 2, 1, launch. Well, that's a good start. We're away from the launch pad. But now we need to make sure we get above 2,000 meters. We can check on our liquid fuel consumption over here, and we can also look at our resources here. If you click the button, it pins the particular option to the screen. So here we can see our liquid fuel being used, and you can see it's being used from the top tank first and then drained from the second tank down. So that's a way of seeing how an individual tank is being used, and you can pin the display of that row from the resources panel by clicking the little button here, but we'll unpin it, just clear that away. We're only really interested in the total. So we're about 50% of the way through, just coming down, and we're at 7,000 meters already. Now of course we could try another goo experiment, and we'll get 7 science for that, so we'll keep that data. But a crew report gives us no science because we've done flying over Kerbal shores already, so we'll reset that experiment and just carry on the flight. Now we're getting close to our altitude, and there we go. So we've now exceeded our altitude of 22 kilometers, and we're still going and going. Now of course we can just throttle down or press the X key to kill the engines. And we get our first sight of high altitude. Now is this high enough up to get us a new mystery goo? 1.6 science from the upper atmosphere, so that's probably the best we're going to get, so we'll take that anyway. And we've actually made it into space, so maybe I should reset that experiment and see if we get a new mystery goo measurement from a yes, there we go, from space near Kerbal. 10 science. Well, after all that we get 10 science. Well, we'll keep it anyway. Now at this point we could try a new crew report, because again we're in space, and yes, we are there, Jeb, we made it into space, and we'll keep that 5 science. Now we can also be a bit risky, and because we're going to be a bit risky, I'm going to enact the F59 simulator by pressing F5, and we get a quick save at this point, because we're going to do an EVA, and hopefully Jeb will hang on. There he is, hanging on to the outside of the capsule. We'll right click Jeb and do an EVA report from space, and a whole 8 science. Great, but we'll keep that and we'll get him back on board. Now all we need to do is fall back down, and that could be a while. Now because it could be a while, we can use time acceleration, and because we're in space clear of the atmosphere, we've got a lot of opportunities to improve the passage of time, and we do that by pressing the period or the dot key, and that will advance time acceleration. So that's time warp of 5, time warp of 10, time warp of 50, and we're coming back down again. So I think we need to reduce time warp, and we do that by pressing the comma key. Now there's two types of time acceleration. There's physical time acceleration, where physics is actually applied to the object, so drag, for example, as you come back through the atmosphere. And there's only 4 levels of that: 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're at level 1 of physics acceleration. Now when you're in an atmosphere, you only get physical acceleration, but when you're out of the atmosphere, out in space, you get general time acceleration, where physics is fixed, and things like the applying physics to moving parts doesn't make any difference to your vehicle. But drag and air resistance certainly does. We're coming down at a heck of a speed, and we're getting re-entry effects and aerodynamic effects. So I think we should dump the fuel and deploy the parachute. Now we probably wasted quite a bit of fuel there, so we could have saved on some funds. But who cares? We've completed another contract. We're a bit further away from the space centre as well, so we're going to lose a little bit more in recovery. That's the end of that. There's the space centre over there. Mountainous region that's behind the space centre. But I think that's been quite a success, really. We've completed our first few contracts. We've set altitude records. We've completed the contracts to gain science. We've done science for its own sake. And we have expanded a node in the tech tree. So all in all, I think that's been a good first episode. I hope you have enjoyed watching. I hope you'll enjoy watching the rest of this Let's Play series as we get a little bit more advanced, able to build bigger ships, do more exciting contracts. And I hope that Jeb will enjoy working with me in Kerbal Space Program. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.